All right, so good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on what time you're watching this. My name's Kenneth Lowe, and in the fall, I'll be teaching 7th grade social studies in Lincoln County. And today I'm going to talk to you about Vygotsky's zone of proximal development. So, first, what is the ZPD as it's commonly referred to as? In our textbook, Sandtrock defines it as the range of tasks that are too difficult for children to master alone, but that can be mastered with guidance and assistance from adults or more skilled children. In other words, we want stuff that is difficult, but still very much achievable. We don't want anything out of the realm of possibility. So, why is the ZPD important in our classrooms? Well, helping students reach the upper limits of their personal ZPDs will greatly enhance the learning process. You'll see why I said upper limits here in a little bit. So what we want to do is we want to use pre-existing knowledge as a starting point and then build upon it using scaffolding. We'll learn later in this presentation that scaffolding and the ZPD are often used interchangeably. They're slightly different, but they still have a very close, important relationship, and we need scaffolding. Here's a note. It is important to stress the relationship between prior knowledge and the scaffolding, which is the new material. This will aid in comprehension later. And we want to make sure that the students understand that relationship because, it'll help them. The zone of proximal development in action. So here's an example, a social studies example, history example, because that's my jam. We're learning about the causes of the First World War, right? So what we already know, what we've already talked about in class, what the students they've got it. We know that the nations of Europe were competing for colonies at the turn of the 20th century, and that it was a period of great technological advances. We had the Second Industrial Revolution. We had all sorts of fun stuff going on. So what we're going to discuss is how this new technology allowed more countries to compete for the same amount of land to colonize. Something has to give, right? So we're going to say, hey, historically speaking, we only had, relatively few European nations colonizing. Now everybody's building up their navies, everybody's building up their armies, everybody's needing more natural resources. We've got more countries going after the same amount of land. Something's going to have to give, right? Something somewhere is going to have to give. So what we would do is we would provide scaffolding to the students by relating this new concept to their prior knowledge using maps, visual aids, that sort of thing. And what I would like to do is I would like to ask my students, if you were a world leader in one of these countries and you wanted to expand your empire and other countries were kind of getting in your way of doing that, what would you do? What would you do in that situation? Because what I think will happen is a lot of my students, even though they don't realize it, will give answers that are similar, kind of on the right track of what these leaders of the European powers did in 1914. And that'll help them kind of see, hey, they were kind of thinking the same thing that I'm thinking. That's not right. So it's all about how you relate it to what they already know and how they can see it kind of practically. So some helpful resources that I found, these are great. First one was the Digital Learning Consultant video on Moodle. It provided a great overview of the ZPD. It had a helpful diagram like this, which we'll talk about in a second. And it kind of talked about, what the end goal is, right? Then we had the simplypsychology.org article that I found that's linked later. It shows the relationship between the ZPD and scaffolding really well. It says how they're similar, how they're different, what we need out of what. Then we had the lifestyle.howstuffworks.com article. It's all about applying the zone of proximal development in the classroom, gives some great examples on how to do that. And then study.com, I know you have to join study.com and all that mess, but it's got a bunch of great resources for teachers, for students, for everybody. And they had a video on there that talks about really what not to do as far as when teaching new material. Don't expect students to know how to do things right away. You got to kind of help them out a little bit. And then it gave a short history of Vygotsky, excuse me, and kind of that relationship there as well. And then lastly, this chart I really like. It shows the development, the relationship between the zone of proximal development in relation to current and possible achievement. So what we've got here in the middle, if you can see my mouse, we've got in green what the student can currently do when they walk into class that day. Then we've got in the purple what I can do with help. This is where we want to be, right? We want to be able to give our students material that they can do with minimal help, right? We don't want to give them stuff they can't do, because then they'll be like, hey, Mr. Lowe, I have no clue how to do this. What do I do? We want to give them stuff right here in the middle saying, well, I don't know how to do a lot of this, but I can get there, right? And then gradually, as we relate this new material to what they've previously known, this green will get bigger, the purple will get pushed out further, and the students will learn more. They'll gain those cognitive skills, those critical thinking skills, and that's what the game's all about, right? That's what we want students to do. So, some takeaways from the zone of proximal development. When helping a student reach the upper limits of their ZPD, it is absolutely crucial to build upon prior knowledge. This will help, again, with that critical thinking. It will help everything make sense. It'll help a student understand why we have to learn things in the order we learn them, because everything builds upon each other, right? And really, that'll help the student retain the material and be able to talk about it and not just regurgitate it, because that's what we want. Again, scaffolding is an integral part of helping students reach the upper limits of their ZPD, but don't use too much, right? The whole point of the zone of proximal development is for the student to receive minimal help. We don't want to spell it out for them all the time. We want to kind of push them a little bit. So if a student can't figure something out right away, maybe give them a hint or two, and if needed, go into more detail, but don't give it to them just yet. Make them work for it. Make them think. That's what we want. And then some food for thought. A lingering question that I have for you all is, how can your students reach their upper limits of their own zone of proximal development? How can you come in every day and say, you know what, I want my students to reach their upper limits of their ZPD today? How can you tailor lessons? How can you use scaffolding to your advantage? Just how can you do that? And if you can figure that out, your students are going to have an excellent educational experience. I promise you that. So here's my bibliography. Again, these are some great sources. I highly encourage you to check them out. And thank you so much for watching my presentation today. I hope you all have a great rest of your summer, and I'll talk to you soon.